Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. On this show, we'll give you the fuel you need through motivational pep talks, the fitness tips to be your healthiest self, fortitude to push through the hardships, and focus you need to build the skills needed for the next level, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm your host, Seal Smart. I'm a wife, a mom, community leader, and fitness professional of over 18 years. I'm here to be your biggest cheerleader, advocate, and connector. Let's be amazing together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. It is another episode, and today my guest is Erika, and I am thrilled to talk with you in this way because we actually did a live testimonial, I guess it's been a couple months ago when you guys flew to Charlotte, and we did that at the house, and it was so awesome. I've actually met you back in 2021. Because of gene type, which we're going to get into. But before we do that, let's share a little bit about who are you?
Yes, great. Thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure to speak to you back a few months ago when we were at your house, and I look forward to kind of talking through some of those topics. And then, starting off with a little bit about myself. Let's see. Where do I begin? I have a family, 2 kids, elementary age, a husband. I'm from the Houston area, but not originally. Grew up in the Chicago area. Came down for grad school, which we can get to when we talk about science a little more, almost 20 years ago, and have gotten stuck here. It's not such a bad place to get stuck, I guess. But let's see, for work, I'm a scientist by training, and I work in disease risk prediction right now. And my sort of passion lies in, science is exciting to me because you're always solving for an unknown. It's a gigantic mystery, and so every day you get to learn new things that nobody else knows, and I find that exciting. So that's my background on the science and where I ended up in terms of my work life. Let's see, more about myself before we dive into the science. Let's see, and I don't know, an interesting fact. I played Division I, NCAA Division I ice hockey.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yes.
I just learned something new. That's so cool.
For my hobbies, I like ice hockey. I still like ice hockey. I've gotten my kids on the ice.
That's a freaking aggressive sport.
It is. You can take out some energy.
So this is interesting. Interesting fact from my side. I actually cheered for the hockey team here in Charlotte. So I was we used to dance on the ice and cheer on the sidelines for the Charlotte Checkers. So
that is very cool.
That is so crazy. I love that. So I do want to talk about, so you said your kids are playing hockey now too?
They are, yes. Yeah, they're elementary age, so they've just started in the past few years. And Houston's not a huge hockey community. So
I was getting ready to say, do you have much there with hockey? I mean, I know you can have hockey anywhere because of indoor rinks, but is that a big sport where you are?
It is not. We have 4 ice rinks in the whole city. So it's not a very big sport, but small community. So everybody who plays hockey knows each other in the area.
Okay. Well, that's its own community. That's a great way to meet people and connect.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk to you about the science because I'm so intrigued with this because I was just telling you this. I was like, it takes a certain personality or a certain, for somebody to want to dive into research that you have. And when you say scientist, that kind of changes it for me on how I see it. But where did that start for you? Were you as a kid, were you into was science your thing growing up?
Not really. So I'm not sure if I loved math and science a little more than, English and social studies, I guess, if you had to divide up the subjects. So I've certainly leaned a little bit towards math and science, but even through university, I mean, my major was molecular biology, but I skimmed the surface. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I knew I was interested in learning more, but I had no idea why. Some people you talk to and they've wanted to be a doctor since they were 10, and that's all they've had on their mind, or they've wanted to research a certain subject, and that was not the case for me. So I graduated from university and I had no idea what I wanted. I wanted to do something in science and I knew I needed to learn more, but I could have gone in 100 different directions and I probably would have been semi-satisfied. So you almost need fate to kind of land you in a spot and just keep going and see, oh yes, this is good, or no, I do want to pivot. So I ended up working at a biotech company in Estonia, so Eastern Europe. I worked there for a year in a company that looked for STDs. So it was a genetics company that processed a lot of samples. And that was really interesting to me. I loved the lab side. Maybe I'm slightly introverted, so I enjoy sitting alone in a lab.
That's got to be a quiet place. Like that's
Yeah.
like total quiet.
Yeah. And so after that year, I knew I really liked this space, but I also knew how much I didn't know. And so going back to school for a PhD was next on my list because I wanted to know more and I had no idea where to start. And, going back to school is a good place to start. So I ended up in Houston at the University of Texas Health Science Center and MD Anderson Cancer Center that has a graduate school program. So that's how I ended up in Houston. And MD Anderson is a big cancer center. So cancer biology became a focus. And again, I don't think I was searching for cancer necessarily, but I ended up here. And it's of interest and it's a great disease to study so many different aspects of biological sciences, because when you develop cancer, so many things go wrong in a person's body, and understanding how and why that happens, it really impacts so many different areas of science. So I ended up studying the tumor microenvironment, which is sort of the healthy cells and tissue around where a tumor forms, and how do tumors form in some people and maybe not in others, and does the environment where they're growing have something to do with that?
That's
So
pretty fascinating. I mean, when you're putting it in that terms, and I know that there's a lot to when it comes to, because I even told you, like, I don't know what all the numbers and the genetic testing and all the different things, I don't really understand that, but you just kind of have simplified it as to what it is that you're actually doing. And I know that that carries us into the conversation about health. And has women's health has it just been health in general, or has women's health become something that's very important to you?
women's health has definitely become more and more important to me. I'd say in grad school, I didn't really think about a difference between men's health and women's health, but over the years, it's become more and more important. And especially, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but breast cancer has been a focus. And obviously that's very focused on women's health, even though there are men that develop breast cancer, but it's overwhelmingly in women. And then the more you learn about certain areas of women's health, and then particularly being a woman and going through certain experiences, you realize the disconnects that still exist in women's healthcare, and that year over year becomes more apparent. And so I am more and more passionate about women's health as time goes on.
Thank you so much to Novice Studios for sponsoring the Be Amazing podcast. You might have noticed Be Amazing has a new look, new titles, and a YouTube channel. Kristen Stegall and her team helped me put a new look and strategy in place to take Be Amazing to the next level. If you want to launch a podcast, revamp your existing podcast, or hand off your production to an experienced team, schedule a call with Kristen at novicestudiosclt.com or head to the link in our show notes. And that's really where we connected because, and I'll backtrack a little bit. I was telling you earlier, I'm wearing pink today because Breast Cancer Month, Awareness Month is October, which will be next month. And that's really where we connected because of Megan B, who I met is a friend of mine. And then a couple years ago, I was doing a strong fitness camp. It was Strong Camp for Strong Fitness Magazine in Charlotte. We were hosting it. And it's all women's fitness camp. And she'd reached out to me and said, hey, is there anything that we can do as far as like awareness for gene type because of, prevention and breast cancer and all of that. And I was like, sure, absolutely. And she's like, do you mind taking this test? And I was like, well, yeah, I'll take a test, sure, I'll take the test. Not thinking anything about it other than it was great to have you all as partners. I was awesome because it's around women's health, which I'm passionate about. And normally from a women's health perspective, it's been more on the fitness aspect, weight loss, things like that I've been around my entire career as a fitness professional. So that's kind of where help for me in fitness, kind of at that point was really where I was focused. I dealt with hormones and things of that nature through my own journey. And I've also been a part of like Dancing with the Stars in Charlotte, which benefited the Pink House, which the Pink House is a place for people that are going through breast cancer can go for support and resources. So I've been very involved community-wise around breast cancer. And I've been around that for years, doing things for years. And I've had several, I've had probably 8 or 9 people in my life within the past 5 years that were diagnosed. So it's just been very, it became very apparent really quick that this was like a really good partnership with y'all being a part of Strong Camp. Well, I took the test and got my results back. And this is where our story kind of starts to sync up. I took a gene type test, which I want you to kind of explain that, but just to give everybody kind of the end result is I found out that I'm at higher risk, 30%. And that was what? Like, how is that possible? Like, okay, like I better pay attention to that. And so that immediately got me to go get a mammogram. And so my story continues there because I took this test. It brought awareness, it made me aware. And then this year, this has been like 3 years later, I went for my mammogram and they found calcifications and wanted to start keeping track. My doctor wanted me to get another, more diagnostic testing, MRI. And I just had that done last week. And so far I'm clear, but I'm thankful for the preventative side of knowing and having that knowledge. So that brings us to gene type, which is one of the tests I took, which is where our story starts. And so share us about gene type a little bit and kind of, and I guess, and talk about the test that I actually took.
Yeah, definitely.
Gene type.
And I think your story is a perfect example of why gene type is important and why it was developed. It was developed for the general population. So the average woman who really doesn't think she's at risk. Just a quick stat is most people are like, oh, I don't have a family history of that disease, I'm not going to worry about it. It turns out for the majority of diseases, but especially breast cancer and a few of the other big cancers and even cardiovascular disease, family history only represents a small proportion of people who end up developing the disease. So in breast cancer, about 80% of the women who end up developing breast cancer do not have a family history.
This is so fascinating to me because I feel like we lean heavily on our family history. And I feel like I've been at I don't know how many forms I fill out and they keep asking me, they're like, so do you have a family history? And I'm like, no, I don't have a family history. but I'm at 30% risk. Like, how does that happen? So there you go.
Exactly. And that is what gene type's here for. So those forms, that's a risk assessment. And risk assessments are really important, and doctors do it all the time, but it's usually just about family history. They'll take BMI into account. They'll take your blood pressure, maybe measure your cholesterol. All of those are risk factors that they use as red flags. And if you are high on one of the numbers, then you have a red flag over your head and they'll pay more attention to you. But the thing is, there are other risk factors that they're not looking for right now. And that's what gene type kind of brings to the front and center. So if you think about my favorite metaphor recently is an iceberg. You think of an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg are the risk factors, the family history, what they ask you, the BMI. Those are easy questions to answer if you know your family history. We'll put maybe an asterisk there because some of us don't know our family history. But underneath the surface, if you've ever seen a picture of an iceberg, it's huge. It's huge and you can't see any of it. And those are kind of like the risk factors that we're not asking about, but are actually there. And so gene type is a test, again, for everybody, not just for a certain population. It's for everybody to help figure out what's underneath the surface. And can we figure out if there are a few more risk factors so your doctor can put a red flag over your head and pay a little more attention and say, look, we should talk about this screening. There is another option for you. For some of these diseases, there are even risk-reducing medications, which are also very surprising. Breast cancer, there is risk-reducing medications available. They're serious medications, but they can reduce your risk by 50% of developing breast cancer. So, if you are at increased risk, it's worth having that conversation about the medication. And those discussions are not going on at the frequency that they should be going on. And so our goal, again, if we go back to women's health, my personal goal is just to bring more awareness, to make sure women actually understand about their own health, about their own risks, and what questions they can ask their doctor. So this gene type test, for example, it does have a genetic component, and it then has questions about family history. It does, because that is a big question. It just doesn't cover everybody. We ask about menopausal status. We ask about breast density status, which is another really big risk factor that I'd love women to be a little more aware of, especially because you will be getting on your next mammogram, you will be getting a breast density notification letter from your imaging center saying either you have dense breasts, which 50% of the population is going to get that letter. You're at increased risk, talk to your doctor. And that's it. So what can we do with that information? Well, one thing you can do is put it into a risk assessment model like gene type. We can take that statement and actually turn it into a number to predict people's risk. So you just told us you had a 30% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer. Anything over 20% is considered high. And so again, 30%, that's the combination of all these numbers that we added up to predict your chance over your lifetime of developing breast cancer.
That's what I found interesting too, because I was looking at it because the radiologist was the one that had asked me about the test. Because when I went in and my doctor wanted more pictures taken so they could figure out I had some different cells and then I had some calcifications and they're just trying to stay on top of it. But, she even asked me, she was like, asked me if it was genetic. And I was like, I just know that I took a genetic test. And I said, I know I have dense breast tissue, of course, because they sent me the letter, And she said, well, and I said, and I'm at a 30% increased risk. And she's like, wow. She's like, and so that's why they have done these follow-up appointments. So every 6 months I'll go in and get checked. And I appreciate that, and I came out clear again recently, last week, it was immediate. Like, we're good. We're in the clear. We're doing great. So, but I really like getting that letter. And if you have no, you get a letter that tells you you're over 20% or your breasts or your breasts are dense, it can be very alarming. And what I do appreciate is that I got that letter, but then I also took a test that helps me, if nothing else, and we've talked about this before, it keeps me in preventative mode and like taking care of my health. And I feel like that's what you all are doing, is providing a tool basically for people to stay on top of your health.
Yeah, 100%. That's the biggest thing. Awareness about your risk can lead to next steps. And that is really helpful. I'll spend maybe 2 minutes describing the difference. So genetic test is such a broad term. And I think a lot of people, when they hear genetic test, automatically think about BRCA.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to just touch on the differences, because there are differences between BRCA testing, the BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene, and the type of genetics that's in a gene type test. So the BRCA1, BRCA2, and there are a handful of other genes that when you do genetic testing for those genes, you are looking for what's called a mutation, or the scientific term is a pathogenic variant. And having this one spot in one of these genes really breaks the gene, if you will, so it doesn't function well. That type of genetic testing is really important. It's typically only covered by insurance if you have a suspicious family history of disease. So only a small fraction of adults qualify for that type of testing. And ultimately, if we look at the general population, about 1% of adults will have a pathogenic variant in some kind of gene, like a BRCA gene or one of the other genes that exist in that space. But 99% of us will not have a mutation. That 99% of us is stuck in the general population, if you will. And that's what gene type addresses with a different type of genetics. So instead of looking at one single mutation, we look at a few hundred, not mutations, we call them variants. And these variants, most of them are actually in between genes in your DNA. So they're kind of spread out, just like little markers in your DNA. We actually do not know what they do. But we know that there's an association with breast cancer. And that's why they're valuable. And I guess they're valuable because we can combine them. On their own, they aren't really valuable. If you think of a grain of rice, if you spill a grain of rice on the floor, it takes you a really long time to find it because you can't even see it. If you pour a whole bag of rice on the floor, suddenly you have a pile and you can see it. That's kind of a similar analogy to these variants. If you just look at one of them, it's like that one grain of rice. You're not going to see anything. It's too small. But if you look at a lot of these variants, all with this tiny association with risk, suddenly you can actually see a bigger number, if you will, a number associated with risk. And what's important is all of us have this risk. It's just at one level or another. Some of us are higher, some of us are lower, some of us are right in the middle, but you don't know until you look. And that's the genetic piece that gene type incorporates to help look below the surface.
That's super helpful, because I think that was the question. Like the immediate question I got from the radiologist was like, did you get brain, you just said it, the BRCA gene test.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, it's not the BRCA. It's a totally different type of test. But that helps me, because then if somebody asks me, I can better explain it. Especially with how you said it with the rice, because that, to me, that's a good association and a way to look at it. Now I know that you have different types of tests, or you have, like the one I took was one type, and then there's ones that you can take that like look at everything, not just for what's the increased risk for breast cancer, but risk for other diseases.
Yeah. So we have 9 diseases in total in this, I guess you would call it a multi-test. So the same concept, a handful of clinical risk factors that are important, like the family history or BMI. Each clinical risk factor is specific for a certain disease. And then we look at this genetic risk, which is called polygenic risk. I don't remember if I mentioned that, but that's the official term, is polygenic risk. And there's a polygenic risk for each disease type. So we have these risk models for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, and melanoma. Those are the cancers. And then we also have it for coronary artery disease, atrial fibrillation, and type 2 diabetes. So we cover a spectrum of diseases that are the most prevalent diseases in the general population. So by the time you reach 70 or 80, these diseases are sort of at the top of the list that you may get. And how do you know if you're going to get a disease? Well, if you understand your risk factors, you know which disease you're more likely to get and which disease you're less likely to get. And then to your point, the awareness, you can plan with your healthcare provider. Maybe we'll focus on screening for this one. Maybe I will, lifestyle changes and being healthy is certainly easier said than done. And sometimes understanding your risk and is an extra motivating factor behind, okay, I will get up and I will, eat this extra healthy thing today. Maybe cut back on that one glass of wine or beer I was going to have. And it can help you make certain choices and lead you, again, step by step, because there's not a quick fix to trying to be healthy and proactive. They're just a bunch of little steps day after day that we can make.
That's what I really appreciate about the fact of taking the gene type test, what it's done for me in my own personal health, in my own journey, where fitness, workouts, eating healthy, like that's a normal part of has always been a normal part of my life. And I've always put like doctor appointments and all that other stuff. I always kind of like brush it to the side or like make it like drag it out to going, don't make it a priority. And I would say since 2021 and getting the test back, like it has definitely caused me to prioritize my health, make sure that I'm going to those doctor's appointments, my dentist appointment, my gynecologist, all the things, like making sure that that's a priority. And I no longer, brush it to the side, because I want to live a healthier, longer life. And if there's a tool that at least makes me aware of like, what risks are, what things I need to be aware of, because information is power. We've got information, we've got power, and then it's up to us what we do with it. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me and how I've applied it in my life. And so I love what you all have created and really how I've personally been, affected by it. So and how it's impacted me. It's impacted me as a person. And when I talk to people and talk about health, it's no longer just about like, what are you eating? Are you moving every day? It's like other things, we know, when was the last time you got your mammogram? When did you go to the gynecologist last? When did you go to your last dentist appointment? Like, it's just all those things, like that's a big part of our health. And so I just no longer want to ignore those things, because it's become even more important to me. So I really appreciate what you all have done, and you've made it accessible. So tell us a little bit about the accessibility, like who can get it, where can we get it, all of that.
Yeah, it is more accessible. We have enabled adults to actually order the test through a telehealth provider, which does make it a lot easier. So we do have a link online, and I think you even have a link.
Yes, I have a link yes, I have a link I can share at the end. So for sure. So I will send that out.
Yeah, and it makes it super easy. So that link enables someone to go in, answer a questionnaire. All of these diseases, all 9 diseases are in there, and the diseases are available based on your age and sex. And so depending on how old you are, anybody over 30 can take the test. And you fill out this questionnaire, and then that's submitted to a telehealth provider who reviews everything. If something looks suspicious, they'll call you. Otherwise, they will sign off on the order if things look okay, and you will get a kit in the mail. It's a cheek swab. So you just swab your cheek, stick it back in the mail, return it to the lab, and that's it. And when the results come back, you actually set up an appointment with a genetic counselor on our platform to review those results. And any clinical notes are written up, and you can give the test and the clinical notes to your doctor to actually then have further conversation, or like in your case, the radiologist, because then they can make changes to your healthcare plan based on what your risk is.
Yeah, I think that's what it was so cool about it is it was super easy. And I went to Dr. Liz, who was my gynecologist, and took the test there and swabbed my cheek there. And because I wanted her to be aware of what I was doing. And then she got the results. And so that's how I did it. So I love the fact that you can do it at home with a teledoc, or your doctor may even have it, right? Because aren't there physicians that actually have it
Exactly.
accessible
And
to
that's
them?
such a good point, because we'd love you to do it with the doctor. We'd love you to actually engage in that conversation, especially if you have a doctor that you can speak to, and that you have a good relationship with. And we can certainly send the kits right to the doctor, and that makes it even easier conversation to keep going, because your doctor is the one talking to you about this. Really, yes, it's a one and done test, but it's a one and done test that sort of sets you up with a strategy for your preventative health care for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So it's setting your long-term goals as a result of this test. And that is best done with your healthcare provider. So if you can go in, have these shared discussions on, okay, I'm at higher risk for this. What do we do now to make sure that I'm all over this?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think that's what's been important for me is I've had such good conversations with my doctor. We're on the same page. And now it's almost like it's a set plan of, I know I'm going to be paying attention to my mammograms are super important, and I'm going to have to keep doing them just to stay on top of it. And so I would encourage anyone that you said anybody over 30, take the test. Like all it is going to give you information about your body. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think and I guess everybody's a little bit different. Some people maybe don't want to know, but I think for the most part, you talked a little bit about being busy, and kind of all of us have busy lives. We all have things that we prioritize and things we don't prioritize. And sometimes just a little test like this can help us redirect where we need to. I know when you're busy with work and family and whatever else might be going on, it is hard to prioritize things. But sometimes, I think, especially as women, it, sometimes we do need to take a little more time for ourselves and say, look, let me just prioritize myself in this one aspect. Let's see where we are, and then we'll keep going, and I'll keep paying attention to everybody else and making sure that everybody else's lives also continue forward the way they should.
Yeah. I mean, it's just taken, and it doesn't take as long as we think it does to go to a doctor's appointment, or to, I even started going to a dermatologist once a year to get my skin checked. That's how much just that one test has impacted me as no, I need to do this for myself, because I want to be a healthy person, the healthiest I can be at every age. And I just turned 50. So it's even more so. I just want to make sure that I'm staying on top of it. So it's not to scare you. It's not to create this fear. It's really just to give you information about your body and help you, like you said it perfectly, redirect, just help you prioritize yourself. If nothing else, it's giving you permission to prioritize your health. And sometimes you need somebody to tell you that it's okay to make yourself a priority.
Yes, 100%.
So where can they learn more about gene type? Where's the best place for someone to go to learn more about what you all do?
So we do have a website. It is genetype.com. That is genetype.com. If you Google gene type, Google autocorrects it to genotype. So that's not ideal. um, so yes, but on that website, we have loads of information about each disease. We have some webinars that have gone on with some of our chief medical officer over the past year. We have a little bit of basic science information, so quite a bit of different information. And then of course, the some order now links, again, if the telehealth provider option is of interest.
And what kind of cost are people looking at when they order a test? Like, is there a cost for the test and then to get your results, or is there just like one fee?
It is just one fee, and it's $349. So $349 gets you as many diseases under that umbrella. So a woman over 40 can get a maximum of 8 diseases. A man over 40 can get a maximum of 7 diseases. So again, the
Okay.
tests, even though they start at 30, we do the cardiovascular and metabolic tests are only for adults 40 and over. So it's the
Okay.
cancers that start at 30,
Got it.
the full package. But that's
And it's
one
it's
set
worth,
price.
I was gonna say it's worth that, like just getting that and then getting your results back and finding out where you are and then making a plan and prioritizing. Like I think these are all key things. And I'll be sharing the link at the end of the podcast. I'll make sure we're actually in the notes and make sure that goes out so that everyone can take advantage of that. And just helping, helping women out there prioritize their health, I think has been like is such a big topic of conversation. Again, we're talking about breast cancer awareness. What a great tool to take advantage of. So I really appreciate your time and talking about gene type and that this is really like a prevention, because it really, when it comes down to it, yes, it's a test, but it helps us, prevent and prioritize. And so I want to switch gears because I want to know what you do, because I feel like this is kind of a self-care thing that I would consider it a self-care move. But what do you personally do for yourself in the self-care space?
Oh, that's a good
Because I know you're a
question.
mom and you work and all of that.
I know. And that's such a tough question because, you know, when you actually sit down and think about it, then you sometimes, I was thinking about this, and do I actually do self-care? That's a big question. But I think so. Reading, I like reading, and I do try to take time and read, and that, yeah, it allows you to not think about anything else. So the reading, that playing hockey, although I have not officially started back up, I used to play, we call it beer league hockey, just um, really late nights, and I can't stay up late anymore. I feel like the kids drain my energy. Um, but I occasionally play in tournaments around here, so that's still
awesome.
fun. And then I think that the exercise. So I do like exercising, and it's just a stress relief.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are probably the self-care that I currently do to at
I
least
love that.
let out some energy or just relax.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And talking about reading, is there anything that that you lean into for inspiration? Is there a quote? Is there a book? Is there a podcast, a song, anything like that?
Hmm. I think so. This is, yes. I do like music. I do like songs for sort of inspiration, but it's more like a energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and recently, probably several years now, there's one song that just gets me enthusiastic and gets my blood flowing, and it's "Wake Me Up" by Avicii. So it's, I guess, sort of techno-y, but
I love that. That's great.
but yes, I really, it's upbeat. You know, I will say, you mentioned quotes. When I listen to music, I don't know if I actually listen to words as much as I listen to just the music and the
Just the
sound.
music part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit strange to say, but so sometimes people ask me what songs I like, and I say, "Oh yeah, I love this song." They're like, "Well, that's really depressing." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah, but it's the rhythm or the
yeah."
music
I
or
was
the
like, "I
beat
don't
or
think
the
I've listened to the
yeah.
actual words."
It's the song, it's the sound, it's the vibe. There's certain sounds or certain things that are played, and you're like, oh man, that really like that'll charge me up because I'll tell you, and I didn't know this till I don't know if you've watched the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader Netflix. Have you seen it? I don't know if you've seen that yet.
No, I haven't, but I did. I used to watch, but this was really old. The old Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, making it was
Yeah,
like making the team, I think, is what it
yeah.
was. Well, the new one's really good, but what was really funny is so when I think of hockey, I think of back to when, because we've talked about this, I think it was when I was on the sidelines as a cheerleader. And every time the guys scored, there's one song that comes up every single time. And I actually have it on my playlist now, but it's Thunderstruck by AC/DC. So then the Netflix cheerleader special comes out, and that's like their song. I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But if I want to get fired up, I will put on that freaking Thunderstruck and be ready to hit the gym. Like, but it's music. That's how big of a role music can play in our lives. And like, and it's more like it's the beat, it's the rhythm, it's the sound, it's the things that get you like excited and energized. So I totally vibe with you on music and how it affects us, because it isn't always about the words. It's more about like just how that sound affects you. So I
Yeah.
love that. Now, do you have I always like to wrap up kind of the last part of the podcast, but is there anything else on your heart that you would want to share? And it doesn't have to be about what we've talked about, but if there's, anything else that you just want to leave us with.
I think I do want to wrap up, and it's along the exact same lines of what we've talked about. I think I'm so passionate right now about women's empowerment, and particularly with a leaning in towards healthcare, um, because if you look back traditionally, women have sort of been left out of so much of our healthcare landscape. Even the dosing of aspirin is all based on men's study. Some very basic drugs that are part of our everyday
See,
health.
I didn't. Oh, this is interesting. Okay. This is
Yeah,
interesting because I never think about that. I've
it's
never thought
such
about that.
exactly. And it wasn't until 1993 when Congress finally signed in a law into effect saying that all clinical research trials had to take women into account. But 1993, that's not that long ago. So up until then, research trials were not focused on women at all. And I think it's obviously a huge issue.
Well, that's a huge difference because our bodies, men and women's bodies are completely different.
Yeah, exactly. And so the way, again, disease impacts us, but the way even with that we stay healthy, it's different. The symptoms for certain diseases are different. So I am so passionate about just encouraging women, especially now that research over the last 30 years has begun to evolve and to focus a little bit more on women's healthcare, that we continue to push in that direction and focus on healthcare that is informed on us as women, um, and that we can sort of be a part of the future as well. So I'll maybe leave a plug here for there's a breast cancer, since it's sort of almost Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Um, there's a trial called the Wisdom Study, and women 30 and over can enroll in it, and it is potentially going to change the way screening, mammography, and um, risk reduction options for breast cancer are are given within the guidelines. So if you're interested in the study, it's thewisdomstudy.org. You can sign up, any woman 30 or over. It's free to sign up, and again, it's furthering women's healthcare.
Well, I love this so much. You've dropped nuggets today. And I think the nugget even about like realizing like in 1993, I was graduating high school. That's a long time ago, but not really. And so it just goes to show like how far we've come, but how much further we can go. And the fact that I'm talking, that you're a scientist and you're a researcher and that this is what you not only do in your job, but this is what you are passionate about and about women's health. And so, thank you for the research you've done and providing awareness and information. And I would encourage any woman over 30 to go do that study. I think that's amazing. I think that's only, again, information is what gives us power. And I just love everything that you stand for. And I just thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Good. Where can they connect? Like if somebody has more questions or if there's even a doctor listening, where can they connect with you?
LinkedIn, it should be Erika Spaeth, Spaeth on LinkedIn, and listed with gene type. So it should be fairly easy.
Awesome. Well, and then if anybody wants to connect with you by email, I'll be sure to drop that. And I can even put that in the notes too, where they can reach out to you personally.
Perfect.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on today. This has been so much like really good information, and I'm excited to share it and can't wait to drop the episode.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Be Amazing podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to someone who inspires you so they can feel amazing too. If you want to help us reach new listeners, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget, you can find the video versions of our episodes on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at the Be Amazing Podcast or DM me at Seal Smart. I'll see you in the next episode.